Woohoo! We're inching closer and closer. Pokemon Legends EA is still looking pretty enticing, if you ask me, and yesterday's trailer certainly didn't detract from that. And now, join me, my fellow gamer nerds, as we look at all the secrets and details that caught my attention, including some details I haven't seen anyone else discussing yet. No better time than the present, so let's get started. First, I am so happy to see Game Freak fixed an issue that we've talked about before in previous footage. In previous trailers, several of you and I myself noticed that Pokemon turning animations were removed during battles. It almost looked like the Pokemon was glitching out a bit too. For me, personally, this was insanely distracting, but I held out hope that this was something Game Freak had time to polish up before the release, and lo and behold, the newest trailer shows that they did. Most notably, you can see this with Mawile here when they do a hop to turn before running. Matter of fact, she tries to do it a bit too many times. Mawile. Wait, Mawile, stop! Anyways, thank goodness, because this was gonna drive me insane if they hadn't fixed this, so now I can rest a bit easier knowing I won't be taken out of the experience by my Pokemon glitching out to turn around. Though granted, it's still not perfect, clearly, and a little more work still needs to be done. Another detail I absolutely adored in this newest trailer is just how much more expressive the Pokemon are. Game Freak has been inching towards making Pokemon look more expressive and detailed ever since Pokemon Legends Arceus, and ZA is no different in continuing that trend. Just look at how Chikorita is panting with her mouth open, and then closes it to tilt her head up and look at us to the side endearingly. This is phenomenal. Pokemon did not do this in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Matter of fact, they wouldn't even look at you unless you talked to them in that game. In Legends Arceus, they would look at you as you approached them or walked around them, but they didn't really change their expression so much as tilt their heads and look at you like this. This may seem small, but it goes so far in making the world feel more alive and giving us an even more intense feeling of closeness with our favorite buds. Speaking of which, we can do activities with our Pokemon. Yeah, now we can lounge on park benches or go to coffee or brunch at cafes. This is what we need more of in this franchise, honestly. Again, this is something Game Freak has slowly iterated on, and the more of these sort of bonding experiences we can have with our Pokemon, the better. There's even a chance we may finally be able to take our Pokemon out indoors. Now, I've pointed this out in a previous trailer, but there were shots of our Pokemon doing indoor battles in settings that didn't have a proper arena setup. ZA, more than any other Pokemon game so far, has blurred the line between battling and walking around with our Pokemon in the overworld. So it's fair to assume that means our Pokemon was able to roam around these indoor spots with us that we saw in these previous trailers. However, the newest trailer confirms that we can, for once, take our Pokemon out and run around with them indoors. We see several shots of this, but the first one is a shot with Emolga running around in this indoor mall. Now, on its own, this might not be the biggest confirmation of indoor roaming with our Pokemon. After all, the indoor mall might have an open entrance, and with the skylight, might register still as an outdoor area. However, we get a shot later of our trainer walking inside the Rust Syndicate's headquarters. It's not our partner Pokemon either that's walking with us. It's our Dragonair, who we seem to have chosen to walk around with us. Previous Pokemon games would have forced Dragonair back in her ball and only allowed our player character to walk here alone. But I guess no more. Gone are the days where our Pokemon aren't allowed to traverse the world fully with us. Gone are the days of being jealous that NPCs get to have their Pokemon out with them indoors, but we can't. Gone are the days! Okay, time for a Pokemon sizes segment again, because, you know, hey, it's me. And Game Freak's confusing me yet again. Alright, so we've deduced by now that Pokemon scale is once again tossed out the window. Every large Pokemon is shrunken down to be comparable in size to our young adult trainer. And I'm still mad about it, but my madness is about to be one of even more frustration because now it's mixed with confusion. I'll reiterate this because it needs to always be acknowledged. The biggest draw of 3D gaming is that you get to provide a sense of scale. There do exist large Pokemon in the world of Pokemon, and getting to see the size difference between a tiny little Togepi and a full-grown Gyarados is satisfying, intriguing, immersive, and enthralling. Game Freak is the only developer I have ever seen create its own problems against a sense of scale. In Sword and Shield, it was Dynamaxing. So every large Pokemon was made to be very small, so that would be noticeable when they Dynamaxed, even Wailord. And so that Game Freak could also keep everything placed on a very specific grid system that had very small squares for normal-sized Pokemon. And by normal, I mean even the ones that were large that were shrunken down. Anyways, it was ugly and immersion breaking. I hated it. I'm glad that we don't have that in Legends Arceus or Scarlet and Violet, but either way. Now, with ZA, their new problem is that sizing might cause issues with the new battle system. Now, I don't agree with their solution being to simply scale down every large Pokemon so that they can all uniformly dodge in the same speed and manner. No, the solution here would have been to balance the game in a way where large Pokemon can tank more damage even with their slower speed. That's the solution any sensible developer would have implemented. Matter of fact, we already know Game Freak balances the Legends games completely separate from traditional mainline. Legends Arceus had its own set of stats and focuses. Most matches were over in 2 or 3 hits to keep the pace of the game fast and engaging, and there was much more of a focus on your Pokemon speed stat. ZA could have focused stats on size and weight, much like how Arceus focused speed. Instead, though, we're getting what we're getting, I guess, and I mean, I don't have any choice but to go with it for now, except there are still large Pokemon now? Okay, so we get to see a fight with a Rogue Mega Tyranitar, and it's pretty dang large. So that means Game Freak did implement some sort of balancing system, at least for some large Rogue Megas, to where I assume it'll be harder for them to dodge, but easier for them to tank more damage. If that's the case, they could have done this across the board though, Game Freak. Matter of fact, we even see the return of Alpha Pokemon in this trailer, but instead of them also being larger, they just have more noticeably glowing red eyes? Or so then what is the draw of catching an Alpha over a regular Pokemon? It can't be the stats, because I assume that you can stat train any of your Pokemon just like you could in Arceus and ZA. Yeah, they should have kept the size scaling. I'm convinced, fully now. Actually, this gets even more confusing because later in the trailer we also see a large Mega Steelix of our own. But in previous footage, we saw a Steelix that wasn't very big, so is there size scaling? I don't know. There have been no signs otherwise that Pokemon have size variations in this game. Every Pokemon we've seen has been the same size until now, so I mark this category officially confused and frustrated. Okay, and side note, you see these curtains with Steelix on them? That's how big the dang Pokemon should be, alright? Game Freak, come on, I swear you do this just to pull my leg specifically. Ugh. Okay, on a positive note, customization looks awesome. I mean, they really only showed options for the female trainer, which is giving me a little PTSD from X and Y, where the female trainer had way more customization options than the male. But I trust that Game Freak has grown past that sort of thing now. Maybe. Possibly. But yeah, not only are these the best customization options I've ever seen in Pokemon, but even the new characters all have really stylish designs. It makes sense this is fictional Paris, but dang, I'm very impressed with Game Freak's sense of style here. This is the best looking Pokemon cast ever, in my opinion. Speaking of which, Rotom is kind of part of the cast at this point. Sadly, I do think this means we can't traverse the city riding on Pokemon at all. We still haven't seen any footage of us doing anything of the sort, so it seems Game Freak really wants to use the Rotom phone to mark a time period for their games. I can only assume the Galar and Paldea games are some of the most recent in the Pokemon timeline, and ZA might even be more recent than those since our trainer is taking the phone a step further and using it for literal parkour. And speaking of parkouring around the city, it seems that somebody is spying on us. At least that's the impression I'm getting from this trailer. Zygarde almost seems to be using his cells to watch us as we journey around the city. So, I'm still curious to see what the story ends up looking like for that in this game. They are purposely keeping it a secret, which makes it all the more intriguing and mysterious, and I love that. There's so much more to talk about, so keep an eye out on the channel for more videos from me, and comment below if you noticed something that I missed. Who knows, you might even see your comment get featured in one of my future videos. In the meantime, here's another video from me if you're interested in just how much I got right in predicting what was going to be showcased in the Direct. I did a pretty good job, I think. If you'd like to support me and have your name featured at the end of all of my videos, then join my Patreon with the link in front of you or in the description, or become a channel member right here on YouTube. I've been Johto Johnny, and I'll catch you all there.